What began in Nepal as a social movement led by largely Gen Z to expose the luxurious lifestyle of so-called Nepo kids tied to the upper class or members of the government has led to the fall of the government there, as well as mass chaos and violence. And so many people watching this might not be very familiar with what's going on in Nepal. I am not a subject matter or geographic expert, but I just want you to know some of the basics. You understand the context because these are wild times. So as of right now, 30 people have been killed as a result of the protests. More than 1,000 have been wounded. And so you're probably wondering, where did this come from? And it is highly complicated. There is no one thing that made all of this happen. There is a lot of history here that is beyond the bounds of one segment on our show to cover. But some of the basics involve last week, Nepal's government banned 26 different social media platforms, including massive ones like WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, and WeChat. That raised, or I would say elevated, fears that already existed that speech could be further restricted for the 30 million people in Nepal, and would also potentially hurt tourism, which is a really important key industry there. The blackout also cut off some 2 million Nepali workers that live abroad and communicate with and send money back to their families. Nepal's economy is heavily reliant on these sorts of remittances. I think I saw something like 1/3 of their GDP comes from these remittances. So this banning was opposed by the population for a lot of different reasons. And that said, anger and discontent had been growing, particularly among younger people in Nepal for some time. There was widespread perception of corruption. The economy was not doing well at all. For the youngest workers, unemployment officially was over 20%. And so there were a lot of issues already, and these crackdowns didn't help. And so people took to the streets. And then there was violence. Security forces used both non-lethal and lethal force to disperse the crowds, killing, I believe, in that first clash, 19 individuals. The government repealed the social media ban after that, but the damage was already done, and protesters continued to flood the streets. Tens of thousands of protesters. They set fire to government offices, including the Supreme Court and the homes of politicians. They burned the actual seat of the government. They damaged airports and hotels. They burnt down one 5-star hotel. And by the end of just Tuesday, the prime minister, as well as 4 other members of the government, had already resigned. Now, the military was called in. There were curfews set. Those curfews were not respected by the population, which saw this as an opportunity for some sort of change in their government. Now, the army is cracking down more. And the craziest thing about all of this is that as of right now, it is very difficult to say who is actually in charge, other than perhaps the military itself. There are opposition figures. There's one member of the Supreme Court that some of the opposition want to see as some sort of interim leader. But right now, it is very unclear what's actually going to happen. And the fact that this is Gen Z, largely driven by Gen Z, rising up in response to corruption and censorship is certainly fascinating for us here in the United States. Jordan, what do you make of this?
I want to approach this delicately. Social media is one component, one piece here. And it's hard to look at this without recognizing a regional, not direct border neighbor, but a regional neighbor, and what unfettered social media posts have led to there in Myanmar. And I don't know where I fall on this debate. They were asking these companies to register what that might look like in terms of policy from afar is a bit unclear. But these general anti-corruption claims, I would like to learn a little bit more, and I haven't seen that fully articulated in Western press. One thing I have seen that is a little suspicious, especially given the National Endowment for Democracy's role and involvement and focus on that area over the last several years, is a lot of English language signs. And that to me always raises a red flag. The main language there is Nepali. Why are there English language signs about their demonstration, if not for creating images and a protest aesthetic for Western audiences? So yeah, I'm treading a little lightly. I want to learn a little bit more, but already some interesting things there that I want to dig deeper on as the story develops.
Yeah, and that's why I led with I am by no means an expert or whatever 2 or 3 levels of knowledge below an expert. I'm not those either in this region. This is not a region or a government or a system that I studied when I was in academia or whatever. So I want to be very clear about that. It's fascinating the pace of what's happening, regardless of all of the different causes and everything. It reminds me a little bit of some of the student protests in Latin and South America over the last 10, 15 years. And just I think about like our government here thinks that they can pursue these policies that screw over a generation, and not only making it so they'll never own a home and all of that, but like pouring gasoline in the fire of AI and robots taking over our jobs, and just imagining it'll be fine. And we're actually going to talk about that a little bit in the aftermath. And I think at some point, if people feel like the system is fundamentally corrupt and if politicians aren't responding, they do go crazy. And I say that as a person that doesn't want to see that. I don't want to see that at all. And I think here in the US, more young people turn to voting for Trump, I think out of a sense of desperation. And I think that they were conned. And I think in the approval ratings since then, I think you can see it. They've turned back against him because they know that he doesn't actually give a damn about them. He came in to give tax cuts to the richest people in the country. And that's a very dangerous game to play with people who are looking forward to a life that suddenly seems a lot less optimistic than it was when they were kids. In any event, we'll continue to see what happens, and maybe there will be a little bit more clarity on some of the concerns that Jordan raised.